How's it going? I never really felt that bad, to be honest with you. I just tested positive, and then you got to go through the motions.
I probably had it about 10 times.
Yeah, who knows? She just messaged me, said she's running a little late, but she's on her way.
Okay, we need to go ahead and get started because we got a lot of stuff. Okay, the Havre Planning Commission meeting for January 9th, 2023 will now come to order. Before I call the roll, I would like to welcome our new membership, please. Wants us for the first time tonight. Knows what he's in for. But you're welcome. I'll call the roll. Harry Miller. Oh, you use that.
Yeah, yeah, thanks.
Everybody needs to have it on and facing their mouth.
Yeah.
Ed Corono is absent tonight. Farhad Shah, absent tonight. Warren Hartenstein.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Tammy Schnegus is paid. Up on her. Courtney Chip Blaze.
Here.
Careful. Only 4 is present. So we have 5 present. We've got a quorum. We can do business. First item on the agenda is have to elect, as we do every year, we've got to elect our chair and vice chair. I'll just open it up for two.
Second.
So Warren Hartenstein nominates Ollie Ford and Harry Miller second. Any discussion on the motion? None. I will ask all in favor to raise your hand. Opposed? None opposed. Conference.
Hi. Mm-hmm.
Think you would make it tonight?
Thank you.
That's good.
Just so everybody knows before we continue, Open Meetings Act allows us to now record videos instead of taking minutes and then having things voice recorded. And if somebody wants a transcript, then we have to pay for a court reporter to do the transcribing. So we're being recorded right now, so everybody has to speak into the microphone so they can hear it. And then all these videos will be available on our YouTube channel. Okay.
Okay, now I need to hear a motion.
On that line, do we need to get names and addresses of people that want to come up and speak?
If people come up, yes, when people come up and speak, they should be doing that as well.
Okay.
I would have done that. So do I hear a motion for a nomination for vice chair?
I'll nominate Harry Miller.
Thank you. Second, Hartenstein. Any other nominations? Hearing none. Any discussion on the motion? None? All right. All in favor of Harry Miller for vice chair? Unopposed. Congratulations, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Okay, the only piece of new business that we have tonight is to take a good look at a proposed ordinance by the mayor and city council make some amendments to the zoning ordinance. This ordinance doesn't have a number on it yet, but you all received a copy of it. Tim, do you want to identify this in any other way, or?
No, not necessarily. So for it to get an ordinance number, it needs to go through first reading in mayor and council. And the last set of ordinances that I discussed with you guys, they went to mayor and council before they came to you for consulting. So they had the ordinance number, and there was a bit of an issue there. So I was trying to get this stuff to all of you before. So without going to mayor and council first for first reading, we wouldn't have an ordinance number.
Okay, well, it is concerned with some language with regard to cannabis, and then some zoning definitions, modifications of zoning definitions. Now, for the benefit of the public who's here tonight, the role of the Planning Commission in considering something like this, we're not part of the approval process. Our duty is not to approve or disapprove the ordinance. It's simply to act in an advisory capacity to City Council. Am I correct? So if we take a vote on anything, it would just be to vote on a recommendation, and that's it. So, but because we are in formal session, if any member of the public wishes to speak to anything that we're discussing, at the appropriate time, I will acknowledge you and come up to the podium and say what you'd like to say. Has everyone on the commission had a chance to review this ordinance? Okay. Tim, do you have anything that you want to add in an introductory?
Sure. So there's two parts to this ordinance, as Volney had mentioned. So there's this new set of definitions, and then there's this addition of prohibited uses in the RB district. So kind of the evolution of this was basically right when I got here, there was some rumblings with different members of administration saying, you know what, there's some stuff downtown that maybe is better suited for Route 40. There was some discussion back and forth, and the pawn shop that's actually downtown have permanently shut their doors. So that sort of made it where it was like, okay, we're not affecting any businesses that are down there, but maybe we don't want a pawn shop back. So on the second page, this is a little bit in reverse. In the second page, there's a list of businesses that are here that are just being considered as being prohibited uses in the RB district. You can't prohibit anything from the entire city, so these would be able to end up somewhere in the city, but the thought would be to keep those out of the downtown area. So this isn't an exhaustive list. The way this worked was that I went through the existing definitions and in our zoning code, and bail bond business was in there, cash for gold. There were some of these items in there that were defined, but they weren't anywhere else in our code. But they all seemed like things that maybe aren't best for downtown. And then going back to the first page, as all of you know, in November, the decriminalization of cannabis in Maryland has passed. So we're a little bit out in front of this in the sense that how you get your hands on marijuana hasn't really been defined yet. So eventually there'll be dispensaries and growers and all these sorts of things. But Eric, in our new planner with us, did some research for us and looked at City of Aberdeen and Bel Air and these other places, and they've already begun to define these things. And the way that they define them are just how it's been defined under the Annotated Code of Maryland. So when the state started this process, they've defined these 4 definitions for cannabis. Aberdeen has adopted those, so we're just kind of getting a little bit out in front and getting our definitions in order. And then as I was going through the definitions, there were these 2 items about non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures. If you remember back in last year when we were discussing the different set of ordinances, we changed that lot of record ordinance, which said if you were a residential in a residential zoning district and you were recorded, before the zoning code was enacted, then you didn't have to follow the zoning rules. So the mayor and council have adopted a different provision saying that you actually have to follow the zoning rules now. So those two non-conforming structure, non-conforming use were changed to take out that rule in the definitions that match that old lot of record ordinance. So part of this is cleanup. Part of this is recognizing some new legislation that was passed by referendum. And then the other part is probably the biggest part for discussion, which is, are there uses that we don't want to see downtown? So there's a small list I put together. This is just kind of some draft ideas. I know when we spoke about some things in the past, there's been some discussion of more economic freedom, that we should be really allowing more things in places so the economy can kind of flourish. There's another side of the coin where people think, pawn shops and that sort of thing shouldn't be allowed downtown. So that's probably the part that's most open for discussion and where we're really looking for all of your advice.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that Councilwoman Vegas is here, and she's now part of the commission.
Sorry for keeping everyone.
Well, fortunately, we had a quorum. We could move ahead. Okay. All right, fellow commissioners, open up to any one of you that would like to comment on any part of this.
We'll let them talk first, and we'll let the audience talk first, and then let us.
Well, I'd like to see what you think so that they can see what you think. That's the way we do in the regular hearings. We discuss something and then we hear what the public has to say, and we might come back and discuss it again, or perhaps change our mind. But so I will.
Some comments or a couple of questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Tim, do I understand that the state legislature will be going through a regulatory process on cannabis, and how might that affect or supersede anything that the city council might do?
They will go through a regulatory process. As I was mentioning there, the mechanism for obtaining marijuana now, it's legal to have it on your person, but how you get it is the question. So there is that regulatory process that will occur. So that's why we're starting actually really basic, and we have just the definitions that they've explored as part of how they move forward with the referendum. So at this point in time, you do have this list of prohibited uses, and you do have a couple of the cannabis things listed in there. It may be that the opinion of this group is that we allow these things downtown just like we allow a couple of those CBD stores now. When the state makes the regulations on what will occur, they won't, according to everything that's been said so far, that local zoning will come into play, but there will be some rules that are mandated from the state. But they won't say, hey, you have to have these downtown. And as of now, that's all that we're really saying, is that maybe we don't want these we don't want cannabis businesses in the downtown area.
And is there any indication that this state would limit the number of dispensaries statewide so that this might become moot for?
It's a possibility. Usually what's happened in other places is they won't necessarily limit it, but they'll give so many licenses or so many opportunities for a certain area, and then that local government would have to decide how that license was used. And then obviously state law would supersede, so the rules of the state would be required as part of that licensing process, and then the local government could go above and beyond if they wanted to. And that's where we don't know if things are going to go yet, but this doesn't at all deal with licensing at this time.
Okay, and by prohibiting cannabis and these other uses within the RB/residential district, that would, I guess by implication, open these uses to other zones in town there's a commercial zone. What other zones might be these uses be located?
Right, yeah, so currently, this will become a bigger discussion because we also, if you notice in this list, there's sexually oriented businesses. So that isn't defined in our code yet, and that is something that requires a bit more of analysis, which we're in the process of doing. the issue with marijuana businesses is that the things that you have with sexually oriented businesses or with liquor stores, for instance, they haven't showed that you have those same issues. There's not the same harms caused. So I'm not sure that they can be regulated in the same way. That they have to be certain distances from certain things. Now, they are being regulated that way in certain jurisdictions, but I'm not sure how legally that would hold up. So the city has to make sure that they're kind of doing their own study and their own legwork on this sort of stuff. As far as our zoning code is concerned, we have a combined commercial and industrial zone, which is basically Route 40 and then the industrial park. There's a catch-all in that code that says anything not allowed anywhere else is allowed in that district.
Okay. And then, as you noted, there's a CBD store downtown, and you would think that might be just a logical extension of that use. I guess whoever owns that store might have a comment on that themselves. And then just a technical question. At the very end, there's a publicly owned waterfront parcels just thrown in. What is that?
In the code right now, section 205-28.1 is publicly owned waterfront parcels. So prohibited uses just comes before that, so that just bumps down. So whatever's there now is what will stay. It just kind of moves down the list.
So it's not really relevant.
No, it's nothing to do with this. It's just a technicality.
Okay.
Something they'll need to change if this passes.
All right. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I sent an email out to a couple of you. The state might have relaxed the penalties, but the federal government still hasn't. So I think we need to stick with the enforcing the federal law, which is sometimes referred to as the drug-free school zone laws, which covers school property, parks, playgrounds, public housing areas, and any other places that children gather. And the rule of thumb is generally 1,000 feet from the property line, not the front door. So there's a restriction of dealing drugs on the federal level there. And if we say, oh, it's okay to do it here, here, and here, they need to be outside of that zone. So I think we should go with what it says in the zoning code there, that they're restricted to the commercial industrial zone of the city. And just write the code so that it excludes it in the rest of the districts.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments. Go to page 3 and we look at the included uses. 1, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7 are defined in zoning code. Number 2 and number 3, which deals with cannabis, the definitions are being presented tonight. If we get down to number 8, number 9, there's absolutely no definition of those two anywhere in our ordinances. I look at those two things, it's pretty easy to figure out what a tattoo parlor is. A tattoo parlor is not defined at all in our ordinances. When you get up to number 8, sexually oriented businesses, that could be construed to mean anything. I mean, most wildest, loosely defined thing I've ever seen. And there is no definition in our ordinances. So I would just recommend to mayor and council that they put that on the list, those two things, they need to whip up a definition with it. As far as cannabis issue, well, and these other things, as far as where they're to be located, I think it's a political issue, political question.
Well, I think we have to make a recommendation, and that's, our recommendation is that,
If you want, I mean, anything that, but in this dais wants to recommend, I think we definitely need to pass it along. And I don't want to put any recommendations till we've heard from the folks out here. Right now, we're just basically expressing our own opinions and asking questions. Does anybody else have anything they want? I can come back to you after. Is anyone out here, audience, the public, wish to speak to this? You would come up and just give us your name and address. Stay close to that mic because we're recording this.
I understand. Carrie Parson, 840 Otsego Street. Not having read the ordinance, just listening to some of the comments, I did take a couple notes. And I understand that people are very reluctant now that cannabis has been approved at the state of Maryland. But in regard to the RB district, you had mentioned a couple of things, one of them being a liquor store. We have liquor stores all throughout the city. We have CBDs. We have holistic businesses. Are we going to start now looking at liquor stores and removing them out of RB? So it's a slippery path. CBDs, the holistic stores. I think we need to look at this not as a political issue, but what's going on, well, yeah, it's going to turn political, we know that, but what slippery slope are you going to open? Because if you turn around and say, we don't want this, then a person could come around and say, I don't want liquor. I don't want this. I don't want a holistic store. I don't want a vape store. So I appreciate turning around and looking at what the city or what other cities are doing in the definition, but changing the RB, what do you really want downtown? And there's other stores that are already in establishment that we actually use that could change your preview. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Else? None? Another question sort of arises, as you say, there is a store that's doors down from my corporate center. Gone in there and spoken with them a number of times because I was doing client work. So I had to interact with them. Very nice. I gathered from my discussions with them that they were selling were products, used cannabis. I was not aware that they were selling stuff that you just walk out and smoke or anything like that. Can anybody enlighten me on that?
So there is CBD that's smokable, and then there is a legally allowable amount of THC, which is basically nothing. It's like non-alcoholic beer. Like there's some alcohol in there, but it's non-alcoholic beer. I mean, yeah, there's a variety of products from things you can eat to smoke to drink that all contain CBD or maybe possibly trace amounts of THC, but it shouldn't have any effect of like a high that you would get.
I mean, they're not selling weed in there, where you just walk out of there with a big bag of weed.
No, they're not. But I mean, and it wouldn't be a big bag of weed, but I mean, that's what we have on our hands coming up with the dispensaries that will be allowed.
Wondering, not a big difference. That, and I mean, everybody thinks of
Mm-hmm.
Be the same as somebody going to the liquor store, then walking right out and walking right around the corner of the liquor store and drink half that pint. Standing right there. Wondering if, at least what I see in that store 2 doors down the street from me is anything close to what a liquor store. Back from the public.
Well, you're not supposed to be selling anything in those vape shops that will get you high.
Point, yeah.
But,
How do you define the difference?
well, it's defined by the law. They can't sell something that will get you high. They can sell you a product made from it, but all the THC is supposed to be removed from it. It's like
So-
drinking a light beer or a,
So you're saying that currently in the state of Maryland, that that's as far as they can go,
right.
anywhere in the state?
It's like buying a non-alcoholic beer. Tastes like beer.
I think the issue you're talking about, I guess you call it, supplements are sold. Oils, and at one point my wife has patronized where was the word is there.
Oh, well, I don't know where those remarks take us, but we've got to make a recommendation.
I have one more question. Do medical dispensaries exist in town or certainly in the state?
In the state, I'm not aware of any in the city.
Okay.
But for those, you would need a medical marijuana card, and then that has to be given to you by a doctor. There's a whole process.
But they're permitted in the state of Maryland?
Mhm, yes.
Yes. All right, well, it's not a big extension to go from medical dispensary to otherwise legal dispensary as well.
In Michigan, what I'm familiar with, the difference between a medical marijuana dispensary and they actually they're within the same
Right.
place.
They're often the same.
Yeah, if you have a medical card, you get prescription level stuff. It's the same thing, I guess, like acetaminophen. You can get a 1,000 milligram pill from the doctor, or you can go to the store and buy 200 milligram over the counter.
Right, I've seen that in New Jersey too.
Mm-hmm.
You have one more comment, if you could come up.
Response to your question, sir, these medical dispensaries are actually partially across the river. There are some that are further down on 40, but what we do have inside the city limits are the methadone clinics and dispensaries.
These dispensaries in town here have CBD products, not the THC product. The THC is what gets you high, the CBD is snake oil.
I didn't know you were such an expert on that stuff.
It's called the internet.
They actually are selling. They're selling
I have a commercial driver's license, so I can't fool with it.
They're selling CBD products now. I think I saw some at Weiss the other day. They're at the pharmacies at the checkout when you go through. I mean, they're not just at these specialized shops anymore. You can buy CBD products basically anywhere.
So this proposed ordinance does not
The definition of cannabis would be what switches it out. So, I mean, CBD comes from the same plant, but it's not sativa or indica or ruderalis.
So this ordinance would, if put into effect, would prohibit downtown right now from opening up downtown.
No, because that's CBD, not cannabis as defined in this definition here, which is the one that would have the THC in it.
Okay. That type of operation that's doors down from you.
Yes, it would still be okay.
They just can't expand their business to medical marijuana and any other.
All that stuff. Okay, let's an agreement, please raise your
What were the two words?
hand. Sexually oriented businesses and tattoo parlors. What is defined in our ordinance? Take that to the bank. Now, as far as these cannabis definitions, so THC is a standard, and let the definition stand as far as our advice. All in favor, raise your hand. Third would be the non-conforming structure part of this ordinance. Essentially gets rid of the March 15th hours that date. And that's always in recent years been troublesome for us to try to look around. All in favor of that, raise your hand. We covered all the business for this.
Yes.
Good. Thank you, ma'am, for giving us the information you gave us. Okay, is there any other business? We have no old business. Any other business anybody wants to bring up for the good of the commission before we adjourn? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned. Now, not done. It's time. Yeah, we're gonna, did you want to present anything in here before we go across the hall?
No, my plan was for the presentation across the hall
Okay.
and to have a work session around the table. Didn't expect so much audience.
How many of you
Very
want to
happy to
sit
have
in
you.
on our discussions?
All plugged in and ready. If it's, love to be able to sit around. I wasn't prepared to have it in here. Is everybody staying for the work session? This is, next time I will plan a little bit differently.
So let's do it this way.
Yeah.
Everyone that's besides staff, everyone that's seated is 600. How many of you would like to sit in on the work session? Charlie, you're not going to sit in on it? I think we can find room for five. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to move across the hall, and that's not a formal planning commission meeting, but it is on the record that, I mean, that we're having it. And we're going to be discussing